Hi folks, Miss Reed here, and today we're going to be taking notes on Essential Question 1, and we're going to be looking at both essential vocabulary and literary focused terms. So these are going to guide our study all throughout this first unit. So you have your note-taking handout in OneNote. It's a good idea maybe to split your screen to have the video and the notes on one side and then your note-taking handout on the other. The major direction that I'm going to give you is that everything in the Prezi that is in maroon is going to be what you're going to fill in on your note-taking handout. So you'll see that there's going to be wording on the Prezi that is in typically blue. Anything in blue is actually already going to be on your note-taking handout, so you only have to worry about the maroon color to take those notes down. But I don't just want you focusing on taking down the notes. I also want you to listen to some of the descriptions that I'm going to give because I'm going to extend beyond what is written on the slide, and hopefully that clarifies some things for you. So if we're all ready and set to go, let's go and tackle these EQ vocab and literary focus terms. So first and foremost, essential question 1 is, how does age and experience influence one's thinking? So please jot this down in your note-taking handout where it asks for the essential question. And then our literary focus is going to be on characterization. So we're really focusing in on our characters and how our characters grow and change from their experiences. So our first term is a fancy German word here called bildungsroman. So we're going to focus in on this a little bit more. A bildungsroman is a coming-of-age story. So see that that's highlighted in maroon. You're going to put that into your notebooks. So when we say a coming-of-age story, we really mean that it's a genre that focuses on psychological and moral growth. So notice, again, in maroon needs to go in your notes. And so it's about the psychological and moral growth of a protagonist who is typically a teenager, and the text follows that teen's transition from youth to adulthood. And so that growth and change is really important. We have a lot of novels that kind of fit this definition of coming of age. But to truly be a bildungsroman, there are 3 characteristics that I'm going to ask you to take down here. So 1, the protagonist embarks on a journey away from home or family due to feelings of loss or discontent. 2, the protagonist finds himself at odds with society and its values. And 3, eventually the protagonist is ultimately incorporated into society. The novel ends with the protagonist's assessment of himself and his new place in that society. 1 word, well, not 1 word, 2 words for you. Harry Potter. So many of you will have read the Harry Potter series or maybe even watched the movies, but think about it. Harry goes on a journey to Hogwarts, and part of this is due to the feelings of loss that he has with losing his parents at a young age, and then the discontent of living with his relatively abusive aunt, uncle, and cousin. So Harry finds himself at odds with society and its values almost immediately. He's kind of seen as this heroic figure, but he's mocked and scorned by some as the boy who lived. He finds himself kind of battling some of these pure blood versus mud blood wizarding conflicts, and he fights for kind of what he believes is right and just. So that conflict stems throughout the story. And then eventually, Harry is able to find his place in society by defeating Voldemort, spoiler alert, and kind of living on with the rest of his life. So most texts, like I said, are going to actually pretty much fill these characteristics. It's a pretty common structure for novels with teenage protagonists. So we're going to take a look at 4 more terms here that are connected to age and experience. The first one is really essential. We're going to talk about this a lot, and I've actually already mentioned this in class a couple of times. But the formal fancy definition is a set of criteria or stated values in relation to which measurements or judgments can be made. So what does this mean? Well, this means that all of our experiences kind of create a lens through which we look at the world. So whenever we're trying to understand something, we are looking at it through our own frame of reference. So I like this example because I think this is an example that we might not have the same frame of reference, but it's going to make a lot of sense. A man at a dinner party is uncomfortable when the conversation turns to childhood vacations, since he grew up poor and never went on vacation. His former poverty is part of his frame of reference and affects the way he experiences the world. Now, maybe you grew up lucky and were able to have childhood vacations, and those childhood vacations are a source of happiness and fond memories. But realizing that not everybody gets to experience that and not everybody has that same frame of reference can be a really great tool for truly getting to know others. We're going to talk a lot about the concept of empathy this year, or being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And your frame of reference and understanding your frame of reference and how it's different from others can be really helpful with this. Our next term is rite of passage. So rites of passage are pretty common in real life and in literature, but it's basically any ceremony or celebration that marks an important stage of life. So these happen from birth all the way through death. So some of the examples would be Sweet 16, getting your driver's license, or bar mitzvah. These are all celebrations associated with a certain age and associated with specific kind of happiness and joy that goes along with that time in a person's life. The next term that we have is generation gap. So the formal definition is the difference of outlook or opinion between people of different generations. And I just like to think of this as any conflict that happens because the two people involved are of different ages. So different ages have different views of concepts. I think technology is a really great example. You might have very different views of a cell phone than your parents do, and maybe even your grandparents. And generations typically have conflict. The hippies in the 1960s were a lot more liberal and liberated than the traditional older generation, and it caused a lot of conflict surrounding the Vietnam War. You'll probably hear things like, millennial and Gen Zer and boomer thrown around. That's all generation gap right now. Loss of innocence is an interesting term because it's a little bit different for everybody, but it's the moment when a person or a protagonist realizes that not all is well and good and easy in life. Life can be very, very difficult and challenging. If you're lucky, you don't realize this for quite a long time. But unfortunately, some people experience this almost immediately. Every person loses their innocence in a different way. It could be the loss of a loved one. It could be facing abuse. It could be learning about war or poverty, or experiencing war or poverty. Same thing with bullying. These are all different examples of how a person loses their innocence. For some people, it's a defining moment. For others, it's something that's kind of gradually learned and experienced. I have to say, I think if I try to think back about where mine came from, I read a lot when I was young, so I was reading things about war and so forth when I was, pretty little kid, but when I was in 4th grade, my best friend's dad died very suddenly, and it was horrible. And even though I logically knew that bad things happened and people died, to experience that firsthand and to see the devastation it had on my best friend was really eye-opening. And so I always kind of look to that as being my loss of innocence. So all of you are going to have a very different variety of experiences that lead up to your loss of innocence. So now we're going to be moving on to our literary focus, but I'm going to have you pause first because I have a little assignment for you in your note-taking handout. I'm going to ask you to find a video clip on YouTube to illustrate one of those previous terms. You have frame of reference, loss of innocence, you have rite of passage, and you have generation gap. Choosing any of those four, find a clip and then answer the question in full sentences about how that clip reveals that term or shows that term. Once you're finished with that, feel free to restart the video and we're going to take a look at characterization. So characterization is the process by which a writer makes a character seem real to the reader. So this is kind of just the overarching concept, but the author uses several techniques in order to do this. So we have 4 terms, well, actually, technically, we have 6 terms that we're going to be taking a look at because we have a couple of pairs. So the first technique that an author uses is what we call direct characterization. In direct characterization, the author is telling us something very distinct about a character. So the narrator can tell us about a character, another character can talk about a character, or a character can reveal something about him or herself. So our little picture here, Raheem is often distracted, but one thing he stays focused on is girls. So already we know he's a very distracted kid, and we know that he really likes the ladies. So the author was very blunt in telling us this about this character, but it's not always that way. Sometimes the reader has to make assumptions and judge for themselves. So indirect characterization, our definition is the audience must infer for themselves what the character is like. In order to do this, we explore 5 techniques. Physical description, so what a character looks like outwardly, their appearance, their clothing, etc. What a character says, so their dialogue. What a character does, their actions. What a character thinks. This is interesting because we don't get thoughts in every text. So this only occurs in certain texts depending on the narrative style. And last but not least, what others say about the character. So other people's opinions can kind of help you get a better sense of a character, but you also have to take them with a grain of salt. So how do we remember these techniques? I love this little acronym STEAL. So STEAL stands for speech, thoughts, effect on others, actions, and looks. So the combination of these 5 things can really teach us a lot about a character. And so we have to kind of train ourselves to look at all of these things and to then make judgments based off of the evidence that we find with these indirect techniques. We're going to take a look at our first pair of character typing, and this is really helpful with characterization. A flat character reveals only 1, maybe 2 personality traits in a story, and those traits are kind of very rigid, they don't change. Often these characters are stereotypes, they're background figures, they're minor characters. And that stands in contrast to our round characters. Round characters are going to be really well developed, and we're going to get a variety of traits and contradictory traits because people are complex. So round characters, your protagonist is typically going to be round, but some of the minor supporting characters will also be round depending on their role in the story. So when we're trying to determine whether a character is flat or round, we have to look for how many characteristics do we see? Do we see this figure as complex or as simple? On the other hand, we've got static versus dynamic, and you might recognize these terms from gym class. We have static traits that you do while you're standing still, so maybe a quad stretch, or we have dynamic stretches like lunges where we're actually moving. So a static character stays the same. They don't move, they don't change. So the events don't alter this character's perspective at all. But a dynamic character is going to change quite a bit throughout the novel. So we have little Simba who goes through an extreme change and ends up coming back to fight for his position of power, even though he was very scared and traumatized by the death of his dad. And we've got the evil villain Scar, who kind of remains bent on his power and his power-hungry madness throughout. So these are our terms. I'm going to have you stop, and I'm going to actually have you find a clip of a character in order to explore this. Feel free to fast forward or rewind and take notes where you missed.